Self-help content is freaking toxic, and it is much more toxic than you think. And our obsession with self-growth is actually more harmful than it's good. I have so much tea and so much toxicness to spit about the toxicity of self-growth. I cannot wait to get into this, and I cannot wait to hear what you guys have to think. I had to film this right now as I was outside walking. Like, it was literally that serious for me to make this video. We're gonna talk about the male-centeredness of self-growth, how being obsessed with self-growth can never be freaking healthy, and if you are actually self-growing or if you're just making yourself into a project, and are you actually becoming a better human being or just toxic? The number one thing that I actually kind of hate about the self-growth community is the obsession with male-centeredness. I have made content about dating, and granted, I've even made a freaking video about treating men like dogs. But the one thing I have noticed across a lot of self-growth content is that the focus is a lot on hating other people, despising other people, and especially hating men, thinking that hating them and putting them in this box like, oh my god, they're so bad, is gonna actually create healthy relationships with them, or some type of idea that it's gonna give you an upper hand. The toxicity that we see with the male-centered content is that thinking you can outsmart someone by focusing on all of the things you don't want is not going to get you a healthy relationship with a man. And it's kind of a band-aid on a big fat wound. Instead of focusing on creating a better life for yourself, you're going to have to create some common enemy. Being stuck in a cycle of consuming content like that will not bring you healthier relationships with a man, even if you do learn some skills. We also have to talk about the whole you need to be alone and you need to isolate yourself. Granted, I do recommend, if you're someone who has been a people pleaser, it's good to spend time alone and isolate yourself to get to know yourself. But that's more spiritual isolation to get to know your own energy. The whole I need to ride it out alone is extremely freaking toxic, because first and foremost, you get kind of an idea that you're better than everybody very quickly, and you miss the nuance of what you can actually grow with if you're actually out and about. You actually don't get to see the mirror of who you truly are unless you actually go and interact with some people. That doesn't mean going and interacting with the people that did you wrong, but you will not have been a better person if you haven't learned to interact like that better person. Granted, having a smaller circle of friends and being more intentional with your time is really good. Like, look at me, I'm sitting out here alone making freaking videos because that's something I prioritize. But that doesn't mean I walk around like I'm just gonna be alone and I'm much better off alone. No, I actually love people a lot. I love talking to them, interacting with. Isolation in the long run is never key, but the separation can help you see the power of your own energy. Also, back to the whole male-centeredness, I do feel like a lot of self-growth content has a big focus on narcissists and people that have done you wrong, and they actually lean a lot more into focusing on resentment more than focusing on self-enlightenment, like figuring out that your reality is actually created from yourself. It's not created. It's not somebody else's fault. Again, the coping is super involved in the whole like, well, it's the narcissist's fault and here's how you grow out of that. Mind you, using those keywords is a great way to create compelling spectacles when it comes to content. And I will definitely not say that that ain't a good idea if you're trying to get a lot of views, because sometimes the hidden message comes when we click on something we think is cytotoxic or something that triggers us. As someone who has a degree in marketing, I definitely know that. But we also have to be self-critical of whether content speaks into our own victim complex, which we would love to hear, because that means we doesn't have to change anything, or if it's about responsibility, aka the ability to respond differently. Another thing that I find kind of toxic about people who consume self-growth content, and I'm not talking about you because I know you're smart, is that a lot of the times when a content creator does grow, who makes self-growth content and experiences things that will push them to become a better themselves, people are like, wow, you changed. Like, they expect the person to always have to be the same, even though it's self-freaking growth. We're not supposed to be the same. We're supposed to evolve. And more so, we're supposed to be slightly hypocritical. If you want to grow and become a better version of yourself, you have to get to a point where you are like, oh, I used to have that opinion, I used to think this and this and that, but I don't anymore. I'm very different. And we are literally so freaking tethered to like adopting one idea about how to do things, and then we don't want to stray away from it. And then when we see others straying away from it because they are actually healthily growing, it's like, no, you can't do that because you said this and this and that. We have to let ourselves evolve from the identity we thought was best for us. And sometimes that means being a little hypocritical. And if we want things to change in our own world, we also have to get comfortable with the fact that other people can change too. Another thing that I've also noticed about self-growth content creation is a lot of it's centered around being this black, nonchalant cat type person, where in order to get the life you want, you need to look a specific way, literally dress in this type of outfit, black turtleneck, fur coat, designer bag. Like, yeah, I am actually wearing the stereotypical self-growth girly outfit, but there's not a specific recipe for how you need to turn. And you also don't need to be the mysterious Romania person to be grown. Having grown doesn't mean you lose your freaking whims. Being grown and actually just preserving your energy can also mean leaning more into being fun. And I think that's something that we definitely don't really see on the internet. It's almost always focused on either being super hyper feminine or super like dark feminine. Wearing the same clothes as everybody else does not make you a more grown, self-grown person. Granted, there are things about wearing certain outfits that can bring out your confidence, and that's a different story. Another thing that's toxic about self-growth is the obsession with self-growth. Because the thing about self-growth is that it only works if you're using it to explore yourself and figure out how amazing you are. It cannot work if it's you using it to create a new project for yourself where you end up seeing yourself as someone who always has to be fit. Because self-growth has a tendency to lean into there's always something more you can do, which means you'll always lean into feeling like there's something you need to fit. There's something you need to level up instead of actually just going out there and doing something. Like, you need to make sure all of these things are healed before you can make moves in the direction of what you want. The moves you make in the direction of what you want, when you've done some healing, will expose the things that you need to work on even more. And then you see it as like a journey and not some type of, we're sitting at home doing all this work, and what work can we do? What work? Like, oh my God, we need to do more work and more. That's most likely the perfectionism talk. And that's just perfectionism packaged in a socially acceptable self-growth vibe. It's not good. Another thing that's toxic, or maybe not toxic, maybe just a hard truth we have to hear when it comes to self-growth, is that when you want things to change, you're gonna have to change things. Sometimes your nervous system is not gonna have time to catch up. Like, self-growth isn't something where you're like indefinitely comfortable and confident with everything you, because if you are comfortable and if you're easing into everything, like, oh, it has to feel good for my nervous system or I won't do, then you're not going to go anywhere. And I think a lot of people set very high expectations for what they want, but then they don't get it because they're not willing to be bold enough. I'm gonna use myself as an example. I started doing my content on here a year ago. I had 300 subscribers. I started just doing like neurodivergent content, and my content has evolved a lot from that. Who knows where my content is going to be? I've taken big steps, tried out many different things. I have even made a music video about 55 Labubu. Sometimes we need to step out of our comfort zone more than what we think is safe, because our dream life lies beyond that point. Another thing that I find super toxic is that everything seems like it needs to be something you're doing at home. Like, you got to do all of this homework to be able to grow. You got to do 1,000 vision boards and 1,000 affirmations. While in reality, the thing that's going to grow you the most is actually going into the freaking matrix, aka real life, and interacting with it and exposing yourself to what it means to do something that's different. Because you don't break the matrix or level up or create your new dream life unless you actually go out there and take action. And action isn't just saying affirmation. While those can be very powerful, but we also have to remember that growing and affirmations and all of that stuff, it works differently for everybody, and not the same methods are going to be useful for everybody. That's also why I don't like the whole, well, this doesn't work for me and I could never do it. It's not supposed to work for you the same way it does for someone else, because they're not you. We need to be critical of the fact that it's probably not going to be the same things that work for everybody, and there's not going to be the quick fix, because the fix is actually within yourself. But more so, the fix is actually in taking action and experiencing rather than just sitting at home. Another thing is the freaking resentment towards everybody and their mom. You're not going to freaking grow out of resentment, out of hating people and saying that they're your enemy. No, you're not. You're going to grow from forgiving. And a lot of people don't want to forgive. Like, there always needs to be an enemy. You are your own enemy if you think there needs to be an enemy, because you want to always have something in your life that is hard, or someone in your life that you can pinpoint that is the root of all your problems. I don't actually think you want life to be easy, because life actually becomes very easy once you let go of all of the resentment towards people and you let yourself grow from the point of knowing that you don't even need to focus on that anymore. Now you have all the time and the energy to focus on what you actually want, which is why the freaking resentment build up in self-growth is not good. Here, one might question, is it me being resentful, talking about that we have resentment and we shouldn't? Anyways, that's the pickle about self-growth. We're always going to end up being a little hypocritical, but that's a good thing, because life is not supposed to be perfect and us having the same opinions all the freaking time. I also do want to say that as a content creator who loves to make self-growth content and talk about my own growth journey, I'm the type of person who will definitely always double back into self-growth. Even if I do end up not doing that type of content, it doesn't mean that I'm not growing, but self-growth is truly pivoting and trying something new. And sometimes the lessons don't happen inside the classroom. They happen when we see what we do, when we have the knowledge that we need. And I have taught myself a lot of lessons by doing the YouTube I'm doing now, and by also doing my own self-growth. And sometimes the self-growth actually triples when we say, okay, let's go out and let's do something that's completely different than just sitting in front of a screen consuming self-growth content, or even making it. If you're someone who only consumes self-growth content, what I can really recommend is for you to make it, because you'll actually realize how much of what you thought you had learned, you had not learned. And if you're making self-growth content, I would recommend for you to go outside and do it. Ooh. Anyways, guys, that was a video about some of the things that I think are toxic about self-growth. And I think we should all actually think about a little bit more. And honestly, I think one of the best things I've done recently is to focus more on making toxic self-growth content, because it actually brings that critical thinking into the notion of self. Because when we know it's toxic, when we enter into, we're also more critical of how to use it. We don't just magically start thinking, oh, this is the perfect advice and it's going to give me the perfect. We're more critical once we already have the freaking toxic in front of, which is also why I'm very happy to have started making that type of content. And I'm going to be making that type of content way more, because we got to be a little self-critical and also critical over what we consume. Not everything is so serious. Sometimes it's fun to just make toxic self-growth content that's more focused on just having fun and being yourself than it is to be super serious about the fact that everybody and their mom hates you, because they don't. Anyways, love you.